Hey everyone. This is going to be like a little quick demo or a walkthrough of Dwell. This is some software I've been working on over the past few weeks. Um, and essentially, what Dwell is it's an LLM wiki reader with a text diffusion layer on top. So, an LLM wiki is something popularized by Andre Karpathy. And essentially, it's a means for LLM to create these little second brain things where they have a bunch of little nodes and they connect together with tags and aliases and dates and all those kinds of things. And that's generally great for LLMs to use as a data source so that it can like quickly and accurately retrieve relevant information. That being said, it's that's the base layer is an LLM wiki. On top of that is a text diffusion model, and I'm using Mercury 2 as the text diffusion model. And essentially, what a text diffusion model is, instead of predicting the next token, it's actually generating a big noisy jumble at the length that you specify, and then denoising that jumble of text into whatever you've prompted it to do. So, what that means is that you can actually take the information from the wiki and then form it with a text diffuser into whatever shape that you want the text to take. So, well, I have some pre-made demos here. So there's some biology one. I have something in Japanese, and then I have one that I made really quickly. That's real. It's not a demo. It's made from Daydream Live's Daemon, which is a music diffusion system. So same kind of deal, but for music instead. Um, the biology one is just totally AI generated, just because I wanted to include some with the GitHub repo so you guys can like kind of like see how it works before creating your own if you don't have one already. Um, so you can just open it. And in this case, I've already like opened this before and read a page, so it's going to give me a resume to resume where I left off. It's also going to let me go somewhere new or surprise me. And I particularly like to engage with information this way, um, especially like factual, like, studious information. I don't always like to read in order. Maybe that's just the way my brain works, but I like to go, where my mind takes me. I like to go where my interests take me. And this kind of allows me to more free form move across the informational space as opposed to having to read, page by page, if that makes sense. So, we're starting at the cell nucleus, because that's where I'm going to resume. It's going to generate in place, and I pause the narration so I don't have to talk over it. So it's generating from the node about the cell nucleus an article here. And this article is about the cell nucleus. Makes sense. Easy enough. Um, but say, down here at the bottom, I've got 4 directions for like where I want to go next. And if I don't like these 4 directions, I can go over to the popular nodes. I can search through the nodes. And if I know that, some other nodes exist, I can look for maybe anything that involves the cell or, whatever. So it's just a more free-form way of engaging with the material that allows you to kind of drift from one thing to the other. And because it's a text diffusion model, it can actually like understand what the previous page was and write the next page to fit with the previous page. So this page is on the cell nucleus, and then maybe I want to talk about a chromosome. So in like the first sentence, you can see it's already connecting the previous page, the nucleus, into the chromosome. So it's kind of like a more seamless way of engaging with the material, but in whatever order, in whatever fashion that you want. Um, and it can autoplay this. Like if I just let the narrator run, it'll automatically jump from one topic to the next topic to the next topic. And if your wiki is large enough and you have enough nodes, that can go on for like ever, really. Like there is no real limit to how long it can just keep rambling about whatever the information is that's in your knowledge base. The only limit is the knowledge base itself. Um, so yeah, that's the bare bones of like the most basic use of this. But where it gets even cooler, in my opinion, is that you don't actually have to do just articles. If you open the settings here, in this first tab, in the read tab here, you can see where I have the form set to article, but the form can actually be anything. Um, I've pre-made some, 4 forms here that are kind of like generic text form layouts, but you really aren't, you know, uh, confined to these 4 forms. It could be anything you prompt it to be. Um, so, say for example, I want to know about the chromosome, but I want to know it in like a Q&A type form. Maybe I want to take this information and, you know, present it to a class or something like that. Well, you select Q&A, you re-render, and it reformats the information about a chromosome into a Q&A. So what is a chromosome? How does DNA fit inside a chromosome? Etc., etc. You can also adjust the level, and all of these knobs are totally independent of each other. So I could have, an elementary school level Q&A. Could also have a scholarly level Q&A. Just to show you the elementary school level, typically it's much simpler. They try to use smaller words. They try to use examples. So like in this case, it compares the chromosome to like a tiny rope. So an elementary school student might understand a tiny rope in relation, and then more easily understand what a chromosome is the idea. You can also change the voice. So you can create vault-specific voices or voices that are specific to the wiki. Basically, just have an AI model read a bunch of the material in the wiki, the source material, and then generate a voice based off the material. And that will basically just give you kind of like the writer's voice in your reading. So if you want to preserve, the way the writer writes, you can create your own synthetic version of that just by pointing an AI at the vault itself and then telling it to summarize the voice of the sources. So that's what's happening here. But you can also use any of these presets: clean, plain, storyteller, noir, mentor, scholar. These are also just like some very generic ones that I've added, but there could be a billion more. And I kind of plan to add a way of training your own later, because I can see this being really useful for, say you're trying to teach a student and, they come from a background where maybe they don't speak very clean English or whatever whatever language you're trying to use. Maybe they have like a very specific slang that is very niche to one, particular community. Well, if you can get a voice trained on that community's slang, then you can translate any information from the vault into that slang so they can more easily understand and digest the material. That's the hope anyway. But you can even just make it more fun for yourself if you don't really like, like boring means of receiving information. You can maybe make it into a storyteller and have it kind of like try and tell you a story with the information. Another thing is that obviously it can translate things from any language. So I have it on the original language here, which is English. If I go out, I actually have a vault here that's totally in Japanese. So if I open the vault with the original language and resume, It's going to display the entire vault to me in Japanese. So this is actually
Chinese.
the narration doesn't work on Japanese or Mandarin or anything like that yet, but eventually. And this is also an elementary rendition of Japanese. That's why it's so much simpler. So if maybe I wanted a college level Japanese article, there you go. The wiki that was used to create this is also totally in Japanese. So this is a means of like taking information from any source and then converting it into a language and a voice that you will hopefully understand better and can use to learn. So right now it's in Japanese. Let's change it to English. And there you go. So this one was about a planet. The directions aren't totally in English yet. I still need to set up the translation for that. Not totally sure how to do that, but I'm sure I'll get it eventually. But no matter what page you go to next, because it's on English, it's just going to translate it to English automatically. You don't have to do that for every page. You can actually create a quiz after every certain number of pages. You can set the amount of pages and the amount of questions that go on the quiz. You can also set the kind of questions that you want the quiz to ask you. The quiz is going to be on the previous pages. So in this case, it'll be the previous 5 pages, and it'll be 5 questions on the previous 5 pages. The quiz is like an open book quiz, so it'll actually highlight the answers in the previous 5 pages, and you can, go back using the little arrows here, and you can find the answers to the quiz. Just a means of like helping you retain the information if you want. Another thing I like it for is like, complicated papers and things like that. Like I said, I'm not really a technical person. I'm not really like an engineer or anything like that. So sometimes when you get these really technical papers on like, DPM solvers and, whatever else, it can be a little over my head. So this is like a college level version of this. Maybe I need to read it at like a middle school level. And it kind of takes out a lot of the equations and a lot of the more complicated things and just narrows it down to something that, I can maybe ingest and understand a little better. And then maybe as I learn more about it, I can, progress up to higher and higher levels. And it's just a means to kind of like meet the reader wherever they are with the material. So you can create, like these wikis, or maybe even any knowledge graph in the future, and you can create them to the highest level of complexity necessary, and then communicate down from the highest level into any other level in any other voice in any other language. So just a means of kind of like taking what would previously be limited to people that are pre-trained in a bunch of things or studied it for years in school in order to understand. You can take stuff like that and really simplify it for the layperson uh, without the middleman. The middleman is going to be your text diffusion model, and whatever you set it to. So that's it for Dwell for now. This is going to be a totally open source project, so anybody can contribute if they want to. I plan to keep adding things as it makes sense, as I think of it, adding ways to improve it, and just generally make it more useful for anyone. So if you have any suggestions or anything like that, feel free to, I don't know, hit me up in the comments or in DMs or whatever, and let me know. Thanks.